you who are geographically inclined, we've gone from America and Ireland to the Middle East and maybe North Africa, rather Horn of Africa. And then we'll proceed further east to Malaysia in just a moment. But first, we go to Lincoln's Legacy in Ethiopia, presented by Kevin Procell and Melissa Rolfe from LSU.
Thank you, Dr. Menon. Turning now to Lincoln's legacy in Ethiopia. As Africa's oldest independent nation, Ethiopia occupies a unique opportunity to see if Abraham Lincoln's democratic legacy played a role in its modernization. Its most famous political leader, Emperor Haile Selassie, who governed the nation from 1930 until 1975, offers a chance to explore how Lincoln may have influenced him and transformed Ethiopia from a traditional society to a modern state. Ironically, Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy, unintentionally made the emperor internationally famous due to Italy's invasion of Ethiopia from 1935 until 1936. In addition to the League of Nations' failure to stop the spread of fascism. In the short term, Selassie gained enormous sympathy, but in the long run, he learned the wrong lessons that would lead to his eventual downfall. For purposes of analysis and discussion, this paper is divided into 5 sections. The first, Ethiopia as a pre-modern society, suggesting what Selassie would inherit. The second, Selassie's elitist education and rise in Ethiopia's political culture. The third, Selassie's return from exile in England and split between acting as an absolute monarch, but encouraging modernization. The fourth, a time of another distraction during the Kennedy administration, until his downfall when he mistook fame for popularity. And finally, some conclusions about what Lincoln's legacy really means in terms of leadership. The political history of Ethiopia, formerly known as Abyssinia, dates back for centuries, which includes an empire that slowly expanded across several dynasties. Although the central government lacked a fixed location to carry out its activities, this slowly changed after the arrival of Christianity. Eventually, emperors arose, which moved Ethiopia in the direction of a central government with strong leaders. Historians have expressed various discoveries on the nature of Ethiopian politics prior to the 19th century. The political history of Ethiopia dates back for hundreds of years from the emergence of empires, which was under the leadership of Aksumites. The first Ethiopian empire was established by the tribes in the highlands region, and later expanded their political influence to include other communities such as the Oromo and the Tigray. There have been several dynasties that have shaped the politics of Ethiopia since the ascension of the Aksumites. One of the dynasties that seized control over Ethiopia and led to the domination of the Horn of Africa was the Solomonic dynasty, which came to power in the 13th century. During the rule of the Solomonic dynasty, Ethiopians used to be ruled by a potentate whom they called Nagusa Nagas, translated means King of Kings. He was central to all the activities of the government. It's during this era that Ethiopia was engaged in making several significant reforms in its military layout and further expanded its territory. Due to the government's lack of a fixed geographical location where all the activities were carried out, the Solomonic dynasty led to a decline in urbanization. However, on the positive side, the Solomonic dynasty led to the growth of monasticism and the formation of a strong political system. In spite of the fact that its landlocked location hindered its development, its isolation contributed to discouraging colonialization, unlike other African nations. This changed with the invasion of Ethiopia by fascist Italy in the 1930s. The stage was set for the emergence of a modern monarch, Haile Selassie, largely through the efforts of his father, Ras Makonnen. Selassie was born Lish Tafari Makonnen on July 23, 1892, and it's clear that his father had ambitious plans for his son. His father had received many diplomatic assignments to European capitals by Emperor Menelik II, and this led to Ras Makonnen's appreciation of the role of European languages and customs, which he wanted his son to learn. Unquestionably, Selassie's most important tutor was Dr. Joseph Italian, who taught French. a language which proved useful for the emperor's diplomatic efforts in the early 1960s. After his formal education, Selassie was appointed governor of the Sidamo and Harar provinces by Emperor Menelik II. Following Menelik's death in 1913, ending a 24-year reign, a power struggle emerged. His grandson and successor, Lij Yazoo, had formed close ties with Ethiopian Islamists, who were viewed as a threat by the nation's Christians. As a result, Yazoo was overthrown, and Menelik II's daughter, Wezaro Menon, was made the empress with Selassie as her regent. After her death, under cloudy circumstances, Selassie ascended to the throne in 1930. It turned out to be a long reign. Selassie's early years as a ruler saw a surprising amount of change to the Ethiopian government due to his recruiting of the group known as the Young Ethiopians, comprised of innovative officials in previously stagnant bureaucracies from very modest backgrounds. The emperor noticed their passion for foreign languages and intellectual pursuits similar to his own, which set a new standard for serving the citizens. Progress was delayed due to the Italian invasion of Ethiopia during the Second World War. What could have been a genuine chapter in experiential education for Selassie led to a life of even greater decadence. In many ways, he became a source of propaganda for the Allies, who used him as a symbol of African resistance to fascism. This was complicated further by his return from exile, when Selassie took credit for the infrastructure that Mussolini's military had constructed during its occupation of the country. Regardless, the country was still on the path to modernization.
Additionally, Selassie made significant reforms in terms of education and human rights, as Lincoln had done during his presidency. Ethiopia served as a model of sorts for other African nations, which became independent in the late 1950s and 1960s. For example, Selassie put a halt to the slave trade in the nation, eventually abolishing it in 1942. He established Addis Ababa University, which became the nation's most important institution of higher learning. His ties to the West earned him support from the United States to open a school in Harar to train teachers with assistance from the U.S. Information Service. His library was named in Lincoln's honor. Harar was chosen due to it being the emperor's hometown for much of his early life. Another international education connection to Ethiopia stems from the University of Lincoln, located in Lincoln, England, the origin of Abraham Lincoln's ancestors. The university offers scholarships to Ethiopian students and has extension programs in the country, with particular emphasis on the MBA program. Unsurprisingly, the longtime emperor developed a warm relationship with John F. Kennedy and his wife Jacqueline Kennedy. The 35th U.S. president had written his first book, Why England Slept, originally his Harvard University thesis during the Second World War. His intent was to criticize the British government for its slow reaction to fascism during the 1930s. Miss Kennedy was fluent in French, thus having a common cultural understanding of the emperor's interests, and both Kennedys were champions of ending colonialism in Africa, as well as successfully advocating for sending Peace Corps volunteers to Ethiopia. They invited the emperor for a state visit to Washington, D.C. in October 1963, which went extremely well for everyone involved. Since the Kennedys admired Lincoln's legacy, and the emperor had a unique silver wreath created for the occasion, designed by the Armenian artist Bedros Savigyan, it was fitting to accept Selassie's request to lay it at the Lincoln Memorial in tribute to the 16th president. Selassie had requested permission to lay the silver wreath at the memorial, since Lincoln has served as a model for him in abolishing slavery in Ethiopia. He chose this location rather than the Tomb of the Unknowns in Arlington National Cemetery as per protocol. Unfortunately, this chapter in the emperor's relationship to the Kennedys ended due to the assassination of President Kennedy, November 22, 1963. A month after the special visit to D.C., the emperor returned for the president's funeral. He conveyed to the Ethiopian media and people of the devastating loss and global leadership that this was. After the emperor lost his second wife to undetermined illness, he soon lost his moorings. His focus turned to seeking adulation from abroad rather than tending to the aspirations of the Ethiopian people. His state visit to Jamaica in 1966 was more of a spectacle than substance for the Rastafarians. While back in his homeland, students protested over lack of free press, workers' rights, and education funding. The emperor's unwillingness to solve the nation's problems led to many of his own bureaucrats and military officers to make decisions themselves. Selassie's international fame undermined his modest modernization efforts that a considerable majority of Ethiopians advocated. By 1975, the emperor died under mysterious circumstances, somewhat akin to how he began his reign. The ideology of the Dergs, the communist regime that replaces absolute monarchy, resulted in an even greater cost to most Ethiopians. It'd be almost a half century for another Ethiopian leader to promote democratic values at home with Eritrea, its neighbor to the east, which had been an arch rival for many years. The 21st century continues to bring new developments to Ethiopia's political history, with one being unexpectedly optimistic. On March 27, 2018, Abiy Ahmed Ali was elected as Prime Minister of Ethiopia and is of Amharic descent, the same ethnicity as the late Emperor Selassie. Within 2 months of Abiy's tenure, he captured the world's attention by making peace with the neighboring country, Eritrea. Hostilities and tensions were typical for both sides, culminating in war in the late 1990s, ending with a treaty in 2000. Recent events proved more hopeful, with Abiy personally meeting with Eritrea's president, Isaias Afwerki, in a ceremony to reopen the Eritrean embassy in Addis Ababa. Current reports indicate that Abiy intends to build alliances with the rest of Africa and the world, while turning away from the more authoritarian aspects of Selassie's tenure. While the future remains uncertain, it is an example of Lincoln's philosophy to seek an end to conflict and promote reconciliation for all. Although Lincoln had never visited Ethiopia or met Emperor Selassie, it did not inhibit the impact his leadership would have on him. Haile Selassie's view of Abraham Lincoln can best be expressed by his own words spoken and inscribed on the silver wreath he bestowed at the Lincoln Memorial. All men who cherish freedom and equality as the most precious of God's gifts owe a vast debt to Abraham Lincoln, whose life and deeds gave eloquent expression to his belief that men of all races and creeds would one day live together in harmony and brotherhood. We express our admiration for this great man and pay tribute to him and to the principles for which he stood.